kind of let these guys do their thing and just try to give some objective feedback as we were trying to get the film down to time, and it was easy for me, to be honest.
I'm Joe Zucco. I'm a senior producer at NFL Films. I was one of the 2 directors on the film and also a producer and editor.
I'm Gotham Chopra, one of the founders of Religion of Sports. I've worked closely with Tom and his team a couple years ago on Tom vs. Time, which we did, and got involved in this project with these guys and just had a lot of fun doing it for obvious reasons.
I'm Robert Klemko. I write for the Washington Post. I once wrote for Sports Illustrated, and Jenny Vrentas and I wrote a story a couple months after he stole the jersey about all the law enforcement efforts to get it back.
Mike, let's start with you. I mean, how did this whole thing start? You know this happens, and then where is that seed planted?
Yeah, well, it really kind of runs right through this. So obviously after the Fox had the Super Bowl that year, and once we had heard that the jersey had been stolen, initially we just thought, oh, that's kind of, interesting or funny, but didn't think too much of it. But then we obviously realized when the FBI were looking for evidence that we had all this footage, not just the footage on the field with NFL Films and our broadcast cameras, but really the locker room footage, the security cameras, and then the footage of Tom realizing that his jersey was missing and everyone that was coming in and out. And so Charlie Dixon, who's my boss, he thought, hey, we might have something here, and he reached out to Gotham and shared some of the footage. And then obviously,
and it was because Gotham had done Tom versus Time, correct?
Right. So then I'll hand it to Gotham.
Yeah, I mean, so Charlie called me. I feel like it's a different caper movie we're now describing, but Charlie called me, said, hey, we have this interesting thing that we think could be a project. Could you look at some of this footage? And I did. And look, as a filmmaker, I mean, you sit in edit rooms all the time and you agonize, man, if there was only a shot of this thing, and if we could use that archive, and here it was. I mean, it was like a treasure trove. I mean, you saw, I think there's 99 cameras, Fox had, and then there's just like general security cameras and everything just in stadiums, et cetera, and it was all there. And I mean, I saw a clip, and I thought, holy shit, this is incredible. And then I thought, but you know what, like, we need NFL Films.
Because you can't do it without the rights to be, correct? Or?
The thing about and I've worked with NFL Films quite a bit, is you never know what you don't know, or you don't know what you don't know, right? And you suspect, because you can troll around the internet, you can see little clips, but then you're like, they must have, if you see one thing, you're like, well, they must have this other thing, and you don't get audio a lot. And so, yeah, I just, having worked with, Joe's partner Ken Rogers and Ross Kediver over there, I was like, we should call these guys.
As a filmmaker, what was the piece of video that you saw initially when they were trying to sell you on this that excited you the most?
I mean, it's all that sort of grainy sort of, it's not the broadcast stuff, because that, you've seen that. It's like, it's those closed caption, the security cameras, and those things in the locker room, and even some of the home video stuff, of course, like, somebody recorded it on their cell phone.
Yes.
It's all of that stuff that's always like, it's sort of a paradox, because when you as a filmmaker or as viewers, you think of great cinematic stuff, but it's actually that
behind
grainy,
the scenes,
like shaky,
access.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me initially out of the gate was knowing what the elation is like when you win a Super Bowl. You're on the field, you're watching those players. The juxtaposition of seeing Tom antsy in the locker room, realizing, to me, hit me right out of the gate. So, Joe, you get the call, and what was your reaction?
I was excited about the project to begin with. One, because, like Gotham said, it's as a filmmaker and a director and producer, you're usually looking for, especially NFL Films, we're known for our cinematography. You're looking for the beautiful shots. And as we started going through this, realized this is a different film for NFL Films. So it was just a great opportunity for us to kind of go down a little bit of a different path, using the Fox resources, using the resources from Shadow Lion and from Religion of Sports to put everything together. It was very exciting.
Rob, you wrote about this before any of this ever happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, way after the fact of the jersey stealing and all the different news stories that came out after that, Jenny and I got assigned this story, and they asked me to go to Mexico, and I had tried to find my passport really quickly and go down
like
there.
Super fast, right?
Yeah.
He said it was Peter King. He said, right?
Yeah. And we're able to talk to all of these, fellow journalists of his, coworkers of his, try to go to his neighborhood and talk to him. And you got the sense that everybody was just really embarrassed that this was even a thing, that this had been a Mexican journalist who had done this. I mean, everybody wanted this saga to be over because it was a big deal.
But you were telling me a little bit before, how did you get that access once you were down there? That's an interesting story about getting the help that you needed.
Yeah, we worked with a fixer down there whose day job, or what she normally did, was connect, say the BBC wants to do a documentary on how cartels make heroin. She would connect the BBC journalists with those people. And so this whole story was just like kind of a walk in the park for her. She saw it as kind of a vacation.
And so, wait, Joe, so I heard that you're the one that convinced Ortega to be a part of this project.
Yes, partially.
How did you do that?
So one of the first interviews we conducted for the film was Robert's, because we knew he had the most background on it. So we figured his interview would help us really lay the foundation. Also, one of the early sort of creative decisions we made is we knew there was a lot of interesting voices involved. We didn't want any narration. So we were going to rely a lot probably on Robert and Jenny, who knew the story from different angles to help us through, which they did an amazing job at. After I interviewed Robert, I had just asked him, like, how did you get anything done while you were in Mexico? And he told me about the fixer, the producer they used down there. I contacted her. She started setting up the interviews with the same folks that he had interviewed in the article. We had talked internally about should we try to get Ortega? We're not going to get him. He hasn't done anything. And then one day I was just like, screw it. Like, I called her and I said, if I write him a letter, can you translate it and get it to him? And she did. And then a few days later, he made contact and said that he would do the film.
How'd you persuade him? What did you say to him?
I told him the film was being made, and we wanted to give him an opportunity to give his side of the story, and that it was an NFL Films production with the Patriots, NFL security. Everybody was involved. So that, I think, put him a little bit at ease that it wasn't going to be, hopefully too sensationalized or anything.
I think Joe appealed to Ortega's own delusion of still being involved,
Really?
With Brady. No, I'm guessing, but I think maybe in his own mind, as you saw, he still has this sense of, well, maybe Tom would come to my house and, hang out with me. So I think maybe he didn't want to not be involved, in some way.
He also, it wasn't an immediate yes for him. There was a little bit of back and forth. And one thing that was important to him was that, because I do feel that he is regretful, and he wanted Tom to hear him apologize.
So that's kind of what did you...
So, I said, well, if we will film your apology and we will read it back for Tom, which we did, and you saw. And
so Gotham, how do you put this whole thing together? You've got all this stuff, and it's all gold. And
Well, it takes a village. I'm looking, Tom's got some great guys who've worked, Ben and Gilad and Jeff and Kevin are all here. Shadowline, the Shadowline team that keep referenced. And, Tom, we all worked together really closely on the Tom versus Time. And I think we had a lot of fun, and Tom had a lot of fun doing that. And he sort of got into the storytelling. And like these, he totally stole my line about relics. And, I think, we talk a lot about that in our group about, what sports mean and beyond. And I think Tom really, at this stage of his career, understands that. And so I think that was obviously getting Tom was as hard as getting Martin in some ways to participate in this, but he understands like the larger narratives around.
Well, what's the ask like initially of Tom? How do you do it?
I mean, it's almost like I was just listening to Joe. It's sort of NFL films as well. Everyone's involved, and this is like it's here, and it's like you're kind of the glue. It's like
everybody's doing it.
Yeah. But it's also like the idea, like that's what I was saying. That idea of relics, like this. There's one version. It's a jersey. Who cares? Like you said, it's like $80 or what did they say it was? You know, maybe Tom signs it's a little bit more valuable. Maybe it's game worn. It's more valuable. Mm-hmm. But it's this Super Bowl. I mean, in this Super Bowl, of course, you know, of the 9, like has a lot of meaning to him, and not so much not just because of the comeback, but because of everything around it. And so I think we all knew that. I mean, and so it wasn't, you know, that hard. He recognized it when he started to listen to everyone else, you know, in the pieces of the story.
Were the moments that Ortega was captured on tape, were they identified before you guys got your hands on the film, or at what point did that happen, and who was it that was sitting around identifying and saying, that's the guy, oh, there he is again? We
had a couple people, Ryan Kelly, who directed and edited the film with me, myself, a couple production assistants. Once we knew the Super Bowls that we was at, or had a pretty good idea, and we just, you know, went back through the raw footage from the NFL Films cameras, from broadcasting, and just, all right, post-game starts here. Let's see if we can find him, and he popped up a lot.
What was that like?
I remember a production assistant, Lauren Helmbrick, came in my office like screaming, like, you have to see this. It was one of the first shots you found. The one with the Steelers, like one of the first ones in there, and they're holding the trophy, and he is like right there. And we're like, all right, we got to keep going on this. I'm sure there's going to be some more. That was pretty.
There's also, I mean, there's some great. We were talking Danny Barton, who's one of the executives from Fox. So when you start looking at that footage, I mean, it's just not just Martin Ortega. You start seeing there were a lot of Fox executives there. One of whom happens to be a huge huge Patriots fan, and there was footage of him doing a sort of snow angel on the field after the game. You know, it's all there. It's all documented. Like, there's 100 cameras capturing everything.
Well, so, yeah, Fox had 99. Films has another 50 there, plus all the local media.
And I think it speaks to that whole idea of it starts innocently, like, right? He probably started many years ago just taking the selfie, but then each year he'd come back and in his own mind, he was probably like, oh, I can get closer, or maybe I can get in the locker room. And sometimes when you do that in your own mind, you feel like you justify it, or you don't see when you cross the line. And it's just kind of human nature. And I think obviously
I was wondering about that, about how fast he admitted, this is probably a good question for Rob, admitting that he did something wrong. Did that happen early, or at what point?
You know, I don't think they had a conversation about right or wrong with him when they came to his home and knocked on the door and got the jersey and everything. I think it was just finally I got caught. I mean, I think ultimately throughout his career of doing this, he took pride in how wrong it was. I mean, his eBay profile is a play on Montezuma, the former raider of lands. So he sees himself as a thief throughout the entire time that he's doing this.
What's he doing now?
Ortega? I don't imagine me working in journalism.
So do you think does this change anything moving ahead towards this Super Bowl? I mean,
it's a lot harder to get a credential.
Is it? I mean, have there been conversations? I was curious about that.
The one thing that I noticed the next year and years after that is that you scan your credential to get into an NFL locker room at the Super Bowl, and I think at the conference championship games as well. Whereas before there was a person there looking to see if you had the right color credential. Now you're actually putting something under, putting a barcode under a laser.
Yeah, I think it's like that during the whole season, right?
Not during the regular season.
Never mind. Gotham, the style that you guys decided to use, and all of you, I guess, as you were part of this together, what was important to you about that? The computer-looking shots when you would font somebody or you would identify them.
Well, I mean, Joe was a lot more closer, and I think one of the things Joe said sort of at the beginning, which has sort of been, I think, fun for us as filmmakers, but I imagine for NFL films, is like we get to be creative in different ways. We get access to incredible material that we wouldn't otherwise, and I think they get to tell stories in a, we've all seen, I mean, I imagine a lot of people here are big fans, and so we've seen the amazing NFL films of like the Super Bowl, etc., and we love that, but this is such a different style, and I think they were the ones who had, obviously there's that device of like the camera overhead, and it's just all to reinforce like this, you're being watched, and I love that, and that was not my idea. That was these guys.
Jay Glazer, that was another question I had. He must have had a blast doing this, huh?
Yeah, well, he was right there involved with kind of digging up and breaking the story, and he says it too. I think going back to what these guys are saying about the look of it, he says, "Oh, that's some Ocean's 11 stuff." And I think when we were thinking of the film, that idea of Ocean's 11 kind of came up, and so I think that maybe informed these guys as they were thinking about how to tell the story, all the way down to the graphics and the music and the very fast pace that the film takes. I mean, they never really take their foot off the gas in this film. It was a little bit longer initially, and we kind of tightened it up. And
how long was it?
It was maybe 20 minutes longer, but I think it works for this because you're just constantly moving,
What's the feedback been that you guys have gotten from whether it's people around the league or just at the story and what actually happened? And is this something that maybe does happen more than anybody realizes?
Well, I know at Fox we were super happy with obviously how the film turned out, but also the process was really smooth. I mean, it's hard when you collaborate with so many different people. Sometimes you butt heads, but I think everybody all the way along was just all about making the film as best as it could be, and we shared ideas, and it really worked out well. So that doesn't always happen. So it was good for me and Danny and everyone involved. That's what I would say.
No, I would agree. The coordination between so many different people, so many different groups was really pretty seamless. Once we got rolling, everybody had great ideas, and we were able to bounce stuff off each other, and it ultimately, I think, turned out to be a better film because of that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like I think this is probably in the LA. These are influencer screenings, so I'm curious like what people thought, because it's just starting. I mean, there haven't been too many screenings, right? Like, so it's just getting out there, and the feedback, I mean, anecdotally has been, it's a little incredible. Like, and I think I'd be curious, but like are they going to get Martin Ortega? Is he actually going to be in this? Which I think is very skillfully done. He's like the Wizard of Oz. You wait till the very end to reveal who he is, and then he's kind of like, you kind of feel sorry for him, I think, maybe, or it's like you just don't know, because the mythology of him and this whole thing, and you guys, like, I mean, it's just like the FBI, the Federales, like, it's just unbelievable, this big thing, and then it's this sort of like sad guy, hiding behind the curtain. I don't know. I mean, you can see Tom's like kind of like, it's a little uncomfortable for a bit.
Well, I thought it was uncomfortable in that moment to watch him taking the selfies in the locker room, because that's uncomfortable, but that's a good thing.
And then when you realize that's not his first selfie with Tom, there's like pictures through the years, with
and interesting to look at all the reactions of the pictures that he shows on the wall of the people in the photos with him, right? And everyone's just kind of obliging.
I think what's kind of neat too is like we all work on sports films, and a lot of them, like 30 for 30s, they're long and they're heavy and they're dramatic, which they're great in their own sense. But I think for me, I know, and I'm sure for these guys, this was kind of fun. It was, I mean, there's a serious part of it and there's a bigger theme, but it's different than a lot of what we get to work with, and it's kind of light. And in the end, with Tom kind of giving his forgiveness, it's kind of in today's society and all the conflict and all the finger pointing, it was kind of a nice, warm kind of feeling of forgiveness. You know, maybe I'm being romantic about it, but I think it was kind of cool.
It was a caper. I thought the other cool thing is throughout this, just because of the things you guys are talking about, you learn a lot about Tom that you didn't know. I found it interesting about the jersey. I didn't know that it was shorter. I like knowing that he stuffs that jersey in the upside down hat. Rob, what was your takeaway from all of this?
I love the way you guys put it together, and I apologize for wearing a Hawaiian shirt to my interview.
I thought it was brilliant. No?
Of course.
Did you do it on purpose?
I thought it was going to be like a lot sillier.
It's like the bolero.
Yeah. No, I thought it was so cool. And the one thing that I noticed in watching it on the big screen here that I didn't think about when I was watching the screener link on my laptop was how you guys, really kind of tapped into that everybody's watching thing, the surveillance thing. I mean, watching the collector kid go into his apartment. It reminded me of how they did a little bit of season 1 of The Wire, when they had the surveillance in the elevator and in the courthouse and all that stuff. It was awesome.
Wow, take that analogy to the bank. The Wire.
Hear that? It's like The Wire.
It was just like The Wire.
Just like The Wire.
So what's next?
Well, these guys are all busy.
What can we talk about?
What can you share?
There's been no free agency talk, no house in Connecticut talk. I don't know. I'm just impressed with that. But I don't know. We have a lot of projects at Religion to Sports and with the Shadowline guys. We love this sort of stuff. We love sports. We're diehard sports fans, and I have to admit, I'm a diehard Patriots fan. I grew up here, in Belmont and Lincoln, so always coming home, and being part of these is really cool. But we also love telling stories that are bigger than sports. So we have some Olympic stuff in the works, and we're working with Tom on something else. And
what's that?
I can't talk about it, but
But he is coming back, right? That has nothing to do with Greenwich, right?
That's not what the project is about. I have not been invited to a home in Greenwich, so I have no information.
Do you want to talk about free agency? No.
No.
I'm kidding.
No.
You brought it up.
I do want to go back to the Super Bowl next year as a fan. Mm-hmm. So, Patriots fan. I will say that.
All right, sounds good. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This has been incredible. Anything else you guys want to share from the process or the story or anything?
I just think one thing I noticed when we showed it in LA, I think, when you're here, you're speaking to the choir as far as Patriot fans and Tom, but most of the nation despise the Patriots and Tom. But I think if you watch this film, you still might hate him as a football player and as a quarterback who's carving up your defense, but I think you come away with it's hard not to like the guy as a person, I think. So that was kind of neat.
Don't you also think that, some guys might have not made a big a deal. Maybe they would have thought about it after the fact, right? But of the jersey and noticing that it was gone initially when he did. I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, like Lindsay said, I think that one was important because of his mom and
right,
stuff.
Of course, of course, yeah.
One of the things I can share that, having gotten to know Tom, especially at this stage of his career, and he's a family man and he's a dad, and I think that's one of the things that you're reacting to. He sees, like a lot of parents, things from the perspective of his children, and that's really what he's talking about at the end, about learning lessons and people making mistakes, but what can we take away from them? And I think that's why you intuitively connect with that, and that's genuine from him. That wasn't scripted at all. That's how he thinks.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. Great work.
Thank you.
It was awesome
Lindsay.
to watch.